Hey, what's up everyone? Craig here for the Tropical Tribe, and in this week's video I'm finally going to give you the midsummer tour of my tiny tropical styled garden. I'm going to split it into sections for you. We're going to start with the canopy. That's all of the plants that are helping create that blanket over my garden to produce its own subtropical microclimate, so it keeps it warmer, out of the wind and a bit more humid. We're then going to move on to the plants that grow up underneath that canopy. So that's the things that like a bit more sun, but can tolerate being under the partial shade of the canopy. That's plants like cannas, alocasias, colocasias, and salvias, because they get up above and enjoy the sun. Then after that, I'm going to go into the subshrub and underplanting. So that's things that people call jungle weeds, like impatiens, and loads of begonias, and ferns, all of that shade planting that I love. So I'm going to share it with you now. I hope you enjoyed the walk around. Let me know if any of you grow any of the plants you see in this video. So I had to pop upstairs to film the first canopy plant for you. It's my Persian silk tree, which is absolutely covered in its delicate pink blooms at the moment. The pollinators are in love with this tree, as am I. Those flowers just double up with its delicate, wafty, ferny foliage, which closes up during the night so that you can look up through the tree to see the stars and the moonlight. But by day, they open up and cast shade over our sun-baked patio. For me, this tree is a must-have. Fantastic flowers and amazing foliage all in one. And my second canopy plant with exotic looking foliage is this roost tree, who forms the canopy over the centre of my tropical styled garden. It's currently holding bright red flowers that look like cones, but it's the foliage I grow it for. These leaves tolerate my coastal winds really well. Gusts can rip through this tree and it still looks pristine. With the roots contained, it shouldn't be a problem in my tropical styled garden. And benefiting from the protection that the roost tree provides, while also forming part of the canopy, is my Begonias, commonly known as the angel trumpet. These enormous blooms pump out their fragrance late in the evening and throughout the night, so be sure to plant it close to where you sit when you're watching the sun go down. I've only got one Begonias bloom at the moment, but there are plenty of buds promising more. And the canopy is brightened up with the golden leaves of this golden Indian bean tree. And it's not just flowers and foliage that my canopy provides. We added this fig tree early in the year and it's grown quickly to form part of the canopy and is already showing signs of producing fruit. Who doesn't love a productive subtropical plant canopy in their garden? And another plant that's not really a canopy plant, but provides protection from winds, is this giant grass, Arundodonax. This is the variegated form. And a group of plants that sit in the canopy, but don't necessarily form part of it, are the bromeliads. They grow epiphytically, up high in the trees in their native habitat. This is Bilbergia windii, currently growing in a pot, and it's produced this intense magenta flower spike that holds flowers that are a rainbow of colours. Next year, I'm going to try and affix these to the top of the trees to mimic how they would grow in their native habitat. Another plant that supports itself using the structure of the tree canopies is this Tillandsia. This is an air plant that doesn't have roots but absorbs moisture from the atmosphere around it. So it likes warm, humid environments, and here it's flourishing just above my stream. And climbers are neither canopy plants or subshrubs, but working their way up through the system. This Chinese jasmine is evergreen and absolutely pumps out the fragrance when the sun hits it on a summer's day. This is a new addition to the garden this year, and I don't know why it took me so long. And in the summer months, my climbing Monstera houseplant comes out to add to the exotic vibe in my tropical garden. It's this careful combination of plants that helps enrich and protect my tropical styled garden. Having that canopy in my garden has helped me massively. It's taken a couple of years to develop because I started from cuttings, but if you've got the money available, go ahead and buy a bigger plant and you'll get that canopy effect straight away. It's helped keep the wind out of my garden. I live in a coastal area, so it stops the wind whipping around and just ruining all of my hard work midsummer. And I've used deciduous trees mostly, because in the summer the sun rises right above the garden and beams down. That's when all of my underplanting, those jungle weeds, need that shade and they'll benefit from having a bit of shade from the leaves. But come winter, the sun goes lower in the sky and just creeps along the back of the garden. If I had evergreens, it would keep that low winter sun out and it would actually prevent the garden from warming up in the winter months, which could kill off some of the perennial plants that I'm trying to get through winter. So by having deciduous, they cast the shade in the summer, lose their leaves, and then in winter, that low winter sun is allowed to come in and thaw out any frosts that I might get. So it's the best of both worlds. I did have evergreens to start, but I could just see the garden getting dark, damp and boggy in winter, and that is not what I want. It will just cause rot for these subtropical plants. So go deciduous. If you're going to go for a canopy, go for deciduous plants. Right, now let's have a look at the next layer. The next layer in my garden consists of shrubs and large herbaceous perennials. This abutilon is a perfect example, again grown from a cutting this past winter. It's got these nodding bright yellow flowers that look great in a tropical styled garden. And I've got a new appreciation for abutilon this year, like this abutilon megabotanicum, because they just keep flowering and flowering for so much of the year. I've trained this one to twine up the stems of my roost tree. I've done this just by loosely tying it in with twine and allowing these Chinese lantern style blossoms just to waft about in the coastal breeze. Another new addition to my tropical styled garden this year are the exotic blooms of this Justicia carnea, or Brazilian plume flower. This is an amazing pink shrub that I will definitely be growing more of. And the blooms on this Tiburtina are iridescent. To me, I think they're fleeting, but they're quickly replaced by new blooms. And they just add to the leaves of this bush, which have an amazing hairy texture. And I'm also growing Salvia convertiflora in my tropical styled garden this year. It's commonly known as the red sword or red sabre salvia, and you can see why. This is a Brazilian salvia that's used to a tropical climate, and it's flourishing in the garden. I love this plant, and I think from now on I wouldn't be without it. Not only does the foliage look great, these tiny, furry, bright red flowers are really adding to the garden as they just protrude up from this understory of plants. Enjoying the humidity behind the stream is this Colocasia. Again, this is new for me this year, but it seems to be liking life, and the wasps just love drinking the water out of the dips in its thick corrugated leaves. Behind it is the Schefflera taiwaniana that we set free and planted into the ground earlier this year. It has produced masses of enormous new foliage, and it looks so jungly. Schefflera are a genus of plants that I recommend anybody trying to grow a tropical styled garden looks at getting. They're fantastic and they are evergreen, so they look great all winter. My Canna Cleopatra has these purple streaks in its leaves, and it's mustering up the energy to flower. And the purple is picked up by this dark-leaved canna. I'm not sure which cultivar this is, but it holds bright red flowers. The cannas and the gingers will be flowering in the next couple of weeks. This is Colocasia Thai Giant. It's big for my garden, but tiny compared to its potential.
If you have time, look it up online. These plants can get massive. And this is my Fatsia spider's web. I used this plant with its variegated leaves to brighten up a dark corner of my garden, and I've fallen in love with it. They've become very popular, and normally I'm fickle. If a plant becomes too popular, I remove it from my garden and I'll swap it with something rarer or newer. But this is here to stay. Just look at that scaly variegation. It's a fantastic plant, and again, I can't recommend it enough to anybody looking for a tropical style plant for their garden. As well as this Fatsia polycarpa green fingers. It's got these really deep lobes and narrow fingers on its leaves, making it a much more tropical looking Fatsia. Some ferns are adding to this mid-story in my tropical styled garden, like this Cyathea cooperi. It's currently quite small and growing in a pot, but again, if you have time to research this plant, these ferns can get absolutely enormous, and in time, if I can get it through winters, it will form part of the tree canopy in my garden. Fingers crossed. And the exotic leaves of my pseudopanax, which are evergreen shrubs from New Zealand, are looking great. This one is mower's toes, and I'm also growing this, Pseudopanax laetus, which has enormous palmate leaves, which look really exotic, but it is taking up a lot of room in my garden. Oh look, and another Fatsia. They really are invaluable plants. This is a variegated form that didn't have a label when I bought it. And for me, fast-growing herbaceous perennials like the cannas and this persicaria add to that mid-story in my tropical styled garden, just like the shrubs do. And this funky foliage belongs to Persicaria painter's palette, which I think is a brilliant name for this plant.
Early in the summer, this layer just looked confused with the lower layer because all of the plants were a similar height. But as the weeks rolled on, plants like the Salvias and the cannas and the bananas just crept up much taller than the rest but stayed below that canopy. And you'll see your layers starting to form, and it's actually quite enjoyable just watching the plants each go to fill out their own space. The cannas are only just now creeping up above and getting ready to flower. Same as the gingers. So in the next couple of weeks, I'll have to do another video showing you the cannas in flower and all of the gingers in flower. But as you can see, the salvias are already putting out loads of repeat flowers, and seeing those red spikes of that Brazilian salvia looks absolutely amazing poking out through the rest of the garden. Those of you who know me or have been subscribed to the channel know that I love the shade planting. These plants just make so much opportunity of shady, dank spaces that so many other plants can't tolerate. I love begonias for this. I have more success with cane begonias like the Begonia luxurians, and I seem to have a skill for killing Rex begonias. And all of us need to admit which plants we kill, and for me it's Rex begonias. I'd love to be able to look after them much better, so if anyone has got any tips, let me know, because the patterns and the colours on their foliage is just unmatched in the plant world. And I'd love to have more as house plants, and then in the summer months, take them out to enjoy the outdoor conditions in my subtropical garden.
But let's take a look at some of the shade-loving plants that I have managed to grow in my tropical styled garden. Plants like this Impatiens arguta, which has fantastic purpley blue flowers that just keep blooming and blooming no matter how much shade this plant has. It does like a drink, and this one is growing in a pot currently, so it's particularly thirsty. Impatiens come in so many shapes and forms, and this stunning orange and yellow one is Impatiens Oricoma cross bicordata, and both of its parents come from around Madagascar. It quickly grows to form a small sub-shrub in your garden. This one was looking better before we had this scorching heat, but you can see how many flowers it puts out, and it holds them above the foliage so they're easy to see. And this Impatiens is a particular favourite of mine. It's Impatiens tinctoria. This forms a large shrub that dies back in the winter but is root hardy, and it has these enormous orchid-like blooms. Now, I have worked around this Impatiens during daylight hours for months and never noticed the scent, but I was watering it growing in my garden late one evening, and it was just exuding this intense lily-like fragrance. They smell glorious. Late in the evening, which makes sense. White flowers tend to be pollinated by night-flying insects. This again for me is a must-have, and I'm going to have a go at propagating this plant later in the year. And I'm also growing this Impatiens species, which hasn't flowered for me yet, but I was more growing it for the foliage, so it's okay. It's got this metallic-y maroon purple underside to the leaves, which I think looks really exotic, and it's unlike any other Impatiens I've seen. I was growing the standard Congo cockatoo, but that became a victim to our new puppy. And begonias are exotic plants that absolutely love the shady conditions in my garden. This is Begonia grandis, heron's pirouette, which should have pink flowers later in the year, and it's proven hardy through winters in my garden. And this is the palm leaf begonia, Begonia luxurians. This is an absolute stunner and unlike any other begonia I've seen. It's a cane begonia, so it can grow quite tall, and it produces enormous leaves when it's happy. This plant is still quite young, but I'm going to try and nurse it through winter indoors so that I can have a bigger plant next year. You can find begonias to suit most tastes. I know lots of people say they don't like begonias because they remind them of their grand's house. It's the sort of thing she was growing under the stairs or on a windowsill. But in a tropical garden, they come into their own. And there are so many shapes and sizes, I'm sure you'll find one to suit your taste. I've grown this begonia from corms. It's Begonia sutherlandii and produces amazing orange flowers, even in the darkest of spots. And the only Rex begonia from the many that I have bought that I haven't managed to kill is this Begonia Black Knight, which has these dark purple leaves and starry like speckles across the surface. And just to prove how varied the leaves on begonias are, look at this one, Begonia pedata fida. It has red stems and these unusual shaped leaves, and it's growing happily in the shade cast by those large fatsia leaves. This is a new one for me this year, and I'm going to try and propagate it to have more plants next year. And growing just beside those begonias, in the shade and with its roots in the shallow water of the stream, is this carnivorous Sarracenia. This has proven hardy for me 3 years outside so far. Those of you who subscribe will have seen my video where I grew these caladiums from tubers. I experimented by putting them outside in the garden early on in the year. They've added so much colour and have been a talking point to many visitors, but they do struggle. Too much sun, too wet, too dry, and these delicate leaves get damaged. So you can see the battle scars on mine, but they still add that exotic element to my tiny tropical garden. And here's my Streptocarpus, grown from a leaf cutting 2 years ago. I don't know what species it is, but it has these intense magenta flowers with yellow throats, and the colour just pops, and it loves to grow in this semi-shade underneath everything else in the garden. As does this, its Woodwardia radicans, and its fern leaves are absolutely enormous. It's an unusual fern because it has the ability to what I call walk. Each time it touches the ground, a new fern grows on the tip of its leaves. So this is how my tropical styled garden looks in August. It is lush and leafy. So many plants have bloomed, but there is so much yet to come. The cannas haven't flowered, the gingers are yet to flower, and my Brugmansia has only opened one bloom, which is one of many buds. So there is so much excitement still to come. That said, I'm extremely happy with how this garden looks, considering how much change has happened in my own garden this year.
Hopefully you enjoyed that August walk around in my tiny subtropical garden in the south of the UK. I've tried to give you a bit more information this time so that you can look at this video as reference to help you develop your own subtropical microclimate in your garden. And it doesn't matter how big or small your garden is, this applies across any space. You can sit outside and have your own patch of paradise. Now if you liked this video, don't forget to hit subscribe and you can join the Tropical Tribe. I'm going to keep sharing my own gardening experiences as well as sharing gardens that have been sent in by the Tropical Tribe. And soon, as the world settles down, I'll be able to go out and film professional growers and specialist growers to show you so many more plants and so many other people with a passion for tropical plants. Thanks for watching. I will see you all in the next video.